The light finds Daria Werbowy at dawn, but not where cameras remember her. Not on runways, not beneath studio lamps, but on a sailboat adrift off Costa Rica. Barefoot, salt slick, her hair a flag for the wind she calls home. She isn't posing. She's exhaling after 20 years of holding her breath. To vanish for her was not escape. It was evolution. But rewind to 2023, when the fashion world collectively gasped at a single photograph. Vogue Paris had done the impossible. They had found Daria Werbowy and convinced her to step back in front of a camera. The image was stark, almost confrontational in its simplicity. Daria on the deck of her boat, hair whipping across her face, eyes staring directly into the lens with an intensity that felt less like modeling and more like a challenge. No makeup, no styling, no pretense. Just a woman who had chosen to disappear and had now chosen, for reasons known only to her, to resurface. The fashion press went into overdrive. "The return of Daria Werbowy," the headline screamed. Fashion's lost icon emerges from self-imposed exile. Think pieces multiplied like viruses. Everyone had a theory about why she left, why she came back, what it all meant. Some saw it as a victory, proof that the industry could lure even its most reluctant stars back into the fold. Others saw it as tragedy, evidence that even complete withdrawal couldn't free you from the machine that had made you. When asked why she had agreed to the shoot, Daria's answer was characteristically cryptic, almost zen-like in its simplicity. "Because I missed the wind." Not the lights, not the attention, not the money or the prestige or the validation. The wind. As if the entire experience of being photographed was just an excuse to feel the elements against her skin. As if fashion was merely a side effect of being alive in the moment. The controversy that followed was predictable but revealing. Former fans accused her of abandoning them, of taking their devotion and discarding it like last season's dress. "How dare she disappear when we needed her?" one comment read, as if Daria owed her existence to strangers, as if her beauty was a public utility that couldn't be shut off without notice. Industry insiders were more circumspect but equally wounded. "She made us all look like fools," a fashion editor confided off the record. "We built her up and she just left, like it meant nothing." But that was precisely the point that no one seemed willing to grasp. To Daria, it did mean nothing. Or rather, it meant less than the alternative. Less than freedom. Less than breath. Less than the ability to wake up in the morning and not have to be anyone other than herself. She had solved a riddle that most people in fashion never even recognize as a riddle. How to be beautiful without being consumed by beauty. How to be seen without being owned by sight. And to understand how she found that answer, we must travel back to where it all began. To a Poland that no longer exists. To a childhood built on displacement. To a girl who learned early that home was not a place but a feeling. And that feeling was always just out of reach. Kraków, Poland. November 19th, 1983. Daria Werbowy was born into a world on the brink of transformation. Poland was still under communist rule, still caught in the gray machinery of Soviet influence, still a place where possibility felt like a Western luxury rather than a birthright. Her parents were working class, her future uncertain, her childhood marked by the kind of scarcity that teaches you to value things by their absence rather than their presence. But even in childhood, Daria possessed something that transcended her circumstances. A strange detachment, an ability to observe the world without seeming to need anything from it. While other children cried for toys or sweets, Daria would sit for hours watching birds or shadows or the way light moved across walls. Her mother worried she was withdrawn. Her father thought she was simply thoughtful. Neither understood that Daria was already practicing what would later become her signature, the art of being present without being attached. In 1989, when Daria was 6, Her family made the decision that would reshape her life. They would leave Poland and immigrate to Canada. It was a gamble, a leap into the unknown, driven by the hope that somehow, somewhere else, life might be easier, might offer more, might feel less like perpetual waiting. They settled in Toronto, joining the wave of Eastern European immigrants who arrived with suitcases full of clothes and hearts full of complicated hope. Home became a word without coordinates. She didn't just lose a homeland. She lost the illusion that belonging was required. The transition was brutal in the way that only childhood displacement can be. Daria spoke no English. The other children at school mocked her accent, her clothes, the strange sandwiches her mother packed for lunch. She was too tall, too different, too foreign. The world mocked her proportions. She turned them into geometry. But where other children might have shrunk or rebelled, Daria simply retreated inward. She learned English by listening rather than speaking, absorbed Canadian culture by observation rather than participation, and developed a survival strategy that would serve her for decades. Become so still that you disappear, so quiet that you become invisible. Every insult was a map. She used them to find elsewhere. Her parents worked multiple jobs. Her father in construction, her mother cleaning houses to keep the family afloat. There was no money for extras, no cushion for dreams, no room for anything but survival. Daria learned to need less, to want less, to treat desire itself as a luxury they couldn't afford. Scarcity taught her a secret the wealthy never learn, that freedom begins where wanting ends. Years later, when journalists would marvel at her ability to walk away from millions of dollars, they failed to understand that Daria had been practicing non-attachment since childhood. That letting go of wealth was easy for someone who had never truly grasped it in the first place. At 14, Daria was spotted by a modeling scout in a shopping mall. The story is fashion folklore by now. The awkward immigrant girl with the striking face discovered in the most mundane of settings, plucked from obscurity and thrust into glamour. But the reality was less fairy tale and more pragmatic calculation. Daria's family needed money. Modeling offered money. The equation was simple, even if the implications were not. She signed with elite models and began the grinding work of building a career. The early years were a masterclass in rejection. Casting directors found her too editorial, too cold, not commercial enough. She was sent to countless go-sees where she would stand in line for hours only to be dismissed with a glance. Next, next, next. The word became a metronome of inadequacy. Every insult was a seed. She watered them with silence, but Daria possessed something that couldn't be taught or faked. An otherworldly quality, a face that the camera loved for reasons it couldn't articulate. She didn't smile easily, didn't perform charm, didn't soften herself for approval. She simply existed, and somehow that existence was enough. She gave the camera stillness, and it mistook it for mystery. Photographers began to notice. Not the commercial photographers looking for all-American prettiness, but the artists, the auteurs, the ones who understood that beauty could be unsettling, that perfection could be alienating, that the most compelling faces were the ones that held something back. Fame didn't seduce her. It studied her, like a specimen that refused to perform. Could the displacement of immigration, the loss of a first language and first home, have created in Daria a permanent sense of rootlessness that would later make it easy to walk away from everything? Was her detachment a survival mechanism or a wound that never healed? The breakthrough came in 2003. Daria was 19, still relatively unknown, still struggling to book major campaigns. And then Prada called, not for a minor job or a backup option, but for the fall-winter campaign, the most important advertising moment of the year, shot by Steven Meisel, the most powerful fashion photographer in the world. It was the kind of opportunity that could make a career or end one, depending on what the camera captured. The images that emerged from that Prada shoot were revolutionary. Daria in a black dress, hair deliberately messy, makeup minimal, staring into the camera with an expression that could only be described as confrontational. She didn't look like she was selling anything. She looked like she was daring you to look away. The fashion press called it the new realism, a departure from the glossy perfection that had dominated the 1990s. But what they were really responding to was Daria's refusal to perform, her unwillingness to package herself for consumption. She didn't walk into the spotlight. She marched like a soldier returning to a war only she understood. Overnight, Daria went from struggling model to industry obsession. Designers who had previously dismissed her now fought to book her. Celine, Chanel, Givenchy, Balenciaga, Yves Saint Laurent, every major house wanted the girl with the enigmatic face and the impossible-to-read expression. She became the face of Lancôme in 2005, a contract worth millions that would last over a decade. By 2006, she was one of the highest-paid models in the world, walking runways in New York, Paris, Milan, and London, appearing on the cover of every major fashion magazine, living the dream that millions of girls around the world aspired to. But was it a dream or was it something else? Behind the glossy magazine covers and the enormous paychecks, Daria was experiencing something that she struggled to articulate even to herself. A growing sense of disconnection, a feeling that the face in the photographs wasn't really hers, that she was watching someone named Daria Werbowy become famous while the real Daria, whoever that was, receded further and further from view. The work was relentless. Runway season meant back-to-back shows, often 4 or 5 in a single day, changing clothes in seconds, walking in shoes that destroyed your feet, smiling on command, performing energy you didn't feel. Photo shoots could last 12 hours or more, contorting your body into uncomfortable positions, holding expressions until your face ached, enduring the scrutiny of a dozen people analyzing every angle, every flaw, every deviation from perfection. Her wings weren't sewn by stylists, they were built by repetition. And then there were the comments, the constant assessments, the casual cruelty disguised as professional feedback. Can you look more interested? Your hips look wider in this light. Maybe if you lost 5 pounds. You're beautiful, but... The sentence always ended with a but, always implied that you were good but not quite good enough, valued but conditionally, wanted but only if you could maintain an impossible standard. Perfection wasn't the goal. It was the cage. Daria absorbed it all with the same stoic silence she had developed as an immigrant child. She didn't complain, didn't push back, didn't allow herself the luxury of sensitivity. She simply worked harder, pushed through, maintained the facade. But something was breaking inside her, something fundamental and irreparable. Every mirror was a theft, every camera an interrogation. The breaking point when it came wasn't dramatic. There was no scandal, no public meltdown, no tabloid-worthy crisis. It was quieter than that, more existential. Daria woke up one morning in a luxury hotel room in Paris, the kind of room most people would kill to stay in, and realized she couldn't remember the last time she had felt truly present in her own life. She was 31 years old, at the absolute peak of her career, and she felt like a ghost haunting her own existence. The lights were brightest when she felt most invisible. She looked at herself in the mirror, the face that had made her famous, the face that had appeared on hundreds of magazine covers, the face that strangers recognized on streets around the world, and felt nothing. Not pride, not satisfaction, not even vanity. Just a profound emptiness, a sense that she had traded something essential for something worthless, that she had won a game that wasn't worth playing. She'd seen enough mirrors. Now she needed windows, That day, Daria made a decision that would shock the fashion industry. She was done. Not taking a break, not stepping back temporarily, but done. Finished. Complete. She would fulfill her existing contracts and then she would disappear, not from modeling specifically, but from the entire apparatus of visibility that came with it. She would go somewhere where no one knew her face, where beauty wasn't currency, where she could remember what it felt like to exist without being observed. The most radical thing a beautiful woman can do is stop being seen. The industry tried to change her mind. Her agent called daily, alternating between pleading and anger. Brands offered more money, better terms, complete creative control. Magazines promised she could work on her own schedule, shoot only what she wanted, dictate every aspect of production. Friends and colleagues tried to intervene, warning her that once you left fashion, you could never really come back, that she was throwing away everything she had worked for. But Daria was unmoved. She had made her decision with a clarity that felt almost spiritual, a certainty that transcended logic or pragmatism. Years later, she would explain it simply. I didn't quit modeling. I just started living. In 2013, Daria Werbowy did what almost no one in her position had ever done. She vanished. Not to another career, not to another form of celebrity, but into genuine obscurity. She sold her Manhattan apartment, turned off her social media, stopped returning industry calls, and moved to Costa Rica, to a small coastal town where tourists came but fashion photographers didn't. She bought a sailboat, not a yacht, but a working vessel that required actual skill and maintenance, and learned to sail properly, not as a hobby, but as a way of life. She adopted a dog, bought a camera, and began taking photographs not of models or fashion, but of water, sky, birds, the kinds of images that had no commercial value but possessed something more important. Honesty. The fashion world couldn't comprehend it. How do you walk away from millions? How do you abandon success? How do you choose obscurity over fame? The questions revealed more about the questioners than about Daria. They couldn't imagine that what looked like paradise from the outside might feel like prison from within. That the very things they envied, money, recognition, beauty, might be weights rather than wings. Daria's days in Costa Rica followed a rhythm that was the opposite of her modeling life. She woke with the sun, not to an alarm. She ate when she was hungry, not according to a shoot schedule. She sailed when the wind was right, walked on the beach, read books, took photographs, existed in a state of deliberate unhurry that fashion had never permitted. Every storm felt like redemption from what she'd survived. She kept a small notebook where she recorded the coordinates of places where she felt truly happy. Beaches where she'd watched sunrises, coves where she'd anchored for the night, spots in the forest where light filtered through leaves in ways that reminded her why beauty mattered. Each location was a chapter in a geography of contentment, a map of moments when she felt fully present rather than performing presence. The hardest journey she ever took was the one back to herself. The solitude was intentional and necessary. Daria had spent 15 years being looked at, analyzed, photographed, discussed. She needed silence the way drowning people need air. She needed invisibility the way others need validation. She needed to prove to herself that she could exist without witnesses, that her life had value even when no one was watching, that she was real even without cameras to confirm it. But solitude is complicated, especially for someone whose entire adult identity had been built on being seen. There were moments of doubt, nights when she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake, if she had thrown away something precious that she would later regret losing. There were times when she missed the adrenaline of Fashion Week, the creative collaboration of a great photo shoot, the satisfaction of a perfect image. There were days when the ocean felt less like freedom and more like exile. Yet every time the doubt crept in, Daria would ask herself a simple question. What do I actually miss? And the answer was always revealing. She didn't miss the modeling itself, the standing, the posing, the being scrutinized. She didn't miss the industry, the competition, the judgment, the constant assessment. What she missed when she missed anything was specific people, specific moments, specific experiences. And those things, she realized, were portable. She could have meaningful work without fashion. She could have creativity without cameras. She could have beauty without being beautiful for others. Friends who visited her in Costa Rica, and there were few because Daria was selective about who knew where she was, reported a transformation. The guarded, slightly melancholic woman they had known in New York had been replaced by someone more grounded, more present, more genuinely content. She laughed more easily, spoke more freely, seemed to inhabit her own skin in a way she never had during her modeling years. One friend, a photographer who had worked with Daria dozens of times, said simply, "She's finally become the person she was pretending to be in all those photographs." They wanted a goddess. She chose to be human. Can anyone truly escape the shadow of their own image? Or does the face you show the world eventually become the face you wear in private, until there's no distinction between performance and self? The years passed quietly. 2014, 2015, 2016. The fashion industry moved on, as industries do. New faces emerged, new icons were anointed, new campaigns were shot with new models who didn't yet know what Daria had learned, that everything the industry offered came with invisible strings attached. That fame was a transaction disguised as a gift, that beauty could be a trap dressed up as a blessing. Daria appeared occasionally in the press, usually in articles with titles like, "Where Are They Now?" or "Fashion's Lost Stars." The tone was always vaguely pitying, as if she were a cautionary tale rather than someone who had made a conscious choice. The subtext was always the same. She had everything and she threw it away. But Daria saw it differently. She hadn't thrown anything away. She had simply stopped participating in a system that valued her appearance more than her humanity, that treated her body as public property, that demanded she remain frozen at 30 while the rest of the world aged naturally. She took up new hobbies, surfing, which taught her about patience and timing, cooking, which grounded her in the physical pleasure of nourishment, photography, which let her be behind the camera rather than in front of it. She learned Spanish, improved her sailing skills, became part of the local community in ways that had nothing to do with fashion or fame. People knew her as Daria the sailor, Daria who helped fix boats, Daria who took beautiful photographs of the coastline. Not Daria Werbowy the supermodel, but just Daria. And for the first time in her adult life, that was enough. The question people always asked, the question journalists would pose whenever they managed to track her down for a rare interview, was whether she regretted it. Did she miss the money, the prestige, the sense of being at the center of something important? Daria's answers varied slightly, but the essence was always the same. "I've seen enough mirrors." It was a perfect response, both poetic and dismissive, both explanatory and opaque. What did it mean? That she had spent enough time looking at herself? That she had grown tired of surfaces and reflections? That she had learned everything mirrors could teach and now needed other kinds of knowledge? All of the above, probably. And none of it in the sense that the real answer was simpler and more radical than any explanation could capture. She left because she wanted to, and she stayed gone because she wanted to. And that wanting was its own justification. But then came 2023, and with it, the photograph that reignited every question Daria thought she had answered. Why now? Why Vogue Paris? Why agree to be photographed again after 6 years of steadfast refusal? The fashion press treated it like a mystery to be solved, a puzzle with hidden meanings and strategic implications. But perhaps the answer was exactly what Daria said. She missed the wind, not the industry, not the attention, not the validation. Just the physical sensation of standing on a boat deck while a camera clicked, the way her hair moved in the breeze, the feeling of being alive in a moment that happened to be documented but wasn't defined by its documentation. She agreed to the shoot not as a return to modeling, but as a collaboration with a photographer she respected, shooting in a location that mattered to her, on terms that were entirely her own. It wasn't a comeback. It was a visit to a country she had once lived in but no longer called home. The resulting image was stunning precisely because it made no attempt to be stunning. Daria looked her age, 40, unretouched, unapologetic. Her hair was wind-whipped and salt-stiffened. Her skin showed the effects of sun and sea. Her expression was neither friendly nor hostile, neither inviting nor rejecting. She simply was, and the camera recorded that being without embellishment or excuse. The feathers were heavier than they looked, but she had learned to carry them and then learned to put them down. The fashion world's reaction was predictably mixed. Some celebrated it as a triumph, proof that age and authenticity could still sell magazines, that beauty didn't end at 30, that there was room in fashion for faces that showed lives actually lived. Others dismissed it as a publicity stunt, a calculated move by a former star trying to stay relevant. And still others saw it as vaguely insulting. How dare she disappear and then reappear on her own terms, as if the industry owed her something, as if she could dip in and out of fashion as she pleased. But Daria, as always, was unmoved by the discourse. She had done the shoot for her own reasons on her own timeline, and what anyone else thought about it was noise she didn't need to listen to. When an interviewer asked if this meant she was back, she smiled, a real smile, not a model smile, and said simply, "I never left. I just found better places to be." At 40, Daria Werbowy occupies a space that fashion has no category for. Neither current nor former, neither insider nor outsider, neither retired nor active. She exists in the liminal zone between visibility and invisibility, available when she chooses to be, absent when she doesn't. She has mastered the art that eludes most famous people, the ability to control her own narrative, to appear and disappear according to her own rhythms rather than the industry's demands. She still lives primarily in Costa Rica, still sails, still takes photographs, still cultivates a life that has nothing to do with runways or campaigns. She occasionally accepts projects, a single editorial here, a campaign there, but only when they interest her, only when they allow her to work on her terms, only when they feel like collaboration rather than commodification. The girl in the photo never left. She just learned to lift the weight of her own legend. The relationship she has with fashion now is healthier than it ever was during her peak years. She can appreciate the craft without being consumed by it, can participate without being defined by it, can recognize its value without mistaking it for her value. She has learned to separate Daria Werbowy the model, a character she played for 15 years, from Daria Werbowy the person, who exists independently of cameras and contracts and covers. Her influence extends beyond her own career. Younger models who feel trapped by the industry's demands look to her as proof that escape is possible, that there is life after fashion, that you don't have to wait for the industry to be done with you before you can be done with it. She has become an accidental icon of autonomy, a living argument that success isn't measured by how long you stay, but by how clearly you know when to leave. Daria rarely gives interviews, but when she does, certain themes recur. Freedom, authenticity, the ocean, the importance of silence, the danger of mistaking attention for love, visibility for value, beauty for identity. She speaks in a way that suggests hard-won wisdom rather than easy platitudes. Her words carrying the weight of someone who has genuinely wrestled with existential questions and emerged with answers that work for her, even if they wouldn't work for anyone else. When asked what she would say to her younger self, the girl who was discovered in that Toronto shopping mall, Daria paused for a long time before answering. I would tell her that everything she's about to gain, she will also lose. And that's not a tragedy, it's a gift. Because losing everything is how you find out what's actually yours. At 5:47 a.m., not in Paris, but in Costa Rica. Not on a yoga mat, but on a boat deck. The light still finds her. But it no longer defines her. Daria Werbowy has become what fashion could never make her. Free. Not free in the sense of having no obligations or commitments, but free in the more profound sense of being unowned, unbranded, unbought. She belongs to herself in a way that most people never achieve, in a way that fashion never permits. She left the mirror behind, but it kept reflecting her absence. The photograph from 2023 hangs in her cabin now. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that she can visit that world without living in it, that she can be photographed without being captured, that the face in the image is just one version of who she is, not the definitive version, not the only version, not even the truest version. She keeps her notebook of coordinates, her map of contentment, and adds to it regularly. The ocean off the coast near her home, a beach in Mexico where she watched a storm, a cove in Panama where she anchored for 3 days and didn't see another human. Each location represents a moment when she felt utterly present, utterly herself, utterly free from the weight of being looked at. The fashion world still reaches out occasionally. Offers come for reunions, for retrospectives, for campaigns that promise creative control and enormous fees. Daria considers them on a case-by-case basis, saying yes when it serves her and no without explanation when it doesn't. She has learned that no is a complete sentence, that she owes no one an explanation for how she chooses to live, that her absence is as valid as anyone else's presence. There are moments still when she wonders about the road not taken. What if she had stayed? What if she had become one of those models who works into their 50s, who transitions into acting or business or design? Would she have been happier, more fulfilled, more successful, however success is measured? But these thoughts don't trouble her the way they once might have. She has learned that every choice forecloses other choices, that every path means not walking other paths, and that dwelling on alternatives is just another way of not being present in the life you actually have. Her final lesson, the one she's still learning, the one she'll probably always be learning, is that freedom isn't a destination but a practice. It's not something you achieve once and then possess forever, but something you choose repeatedly, daily, in small moments and large decisions. Every morning she wakes up and chooses again. To live on her terms, to value her peace over others' expectations, to be visible only when she wants to be, to remember that she is not her face, not her career, not her past, but something more essential and less definable. Freedom, she learned, isn't the absence of witness. It's the presence of self. Kate Moss once said of her, "She's the one who actually got away." It was meant as a compliment, but it also carried an undertone of something else. Envy, perhaps, or recognition that what Daria had done was both simple and impossibly difficult. She had walked away from everything most people in fashion spend their whole lives trying to achieve. And she had done it not because she failed, but because she succeeded at something more important. She had learned who she was beneath the image, and she had chosen that self over the version the cameras loved. If vanishing is the truest form of rebellion, what does that say about the world we keep returning to? And when silence becomes your language, do you lose your audience or finally find your voice?